Otherwise, we'll just have to go back to a previous one. I'm going to see if I can set it up differently for the next few lectures. Otherwise, somebody might get hurt. Right? Not literally, but you know. Okay, so this module is a module that is very practical. And this is something I know that students like because they're saying, well, look, we've had the theory, right? Can we do something that's actually doing stuff? And that's what this module is. But there is also theory. So this is about decision-making. It's about the type of decisions. It's about the type of decision-making approaches which you will learn by doing. And retrospectively, that's afterwards, you'll think, should we have done it that way? Because the game was either very good or very bad for us, and we can reflect on what we've done and also think about how culture will affect decision making. Okay, so it's about decision making, hence integrated business decisions, and the integrated bit is about you working in a kind of a pretend business with some of your colleagues, and you have to think about integrating decisions in different parts of that business while making sure that you crush your enemies and overall come top. So again, this will make sense a lot more when you actually start doing it. Okay, so the game is called Marketplace, and I think you should have had an email sometime on Thursday night or Friday morning, hopefully from me or Alfonso with your logins. If not, well, let me know, but you should have. Okay, so just want to check that the remote students are still there. I haven't sort of been too upset by my oh, thank God for that. Right, can I actually now change them all to, no, I can't. That is bizarre. Just to let you know that moderators are people like me that can do stuff. They can stop recording, they can move the slides on. Participants are people that can't, and that's what I want them to be. One of them is, the rest of them aren't. I have no idea why. So welcome to the world of IT. Okay, I'm going to just get rid of that. Okay, so the game scenario. Now, I suspect some of you have already read the document that's on Blackboard and that talks about this business world. Okay, this is a business world where you just have to accept and pretend that personal computers don't exist. All right, so just go along with it. All right, there are different scenarios. There's one with bikes, there's one with PCs. It doesn't matter. So what happens in the real world out there bears no resemblance to what you're going to be dealing with here. Okay, you'll be bombarded with information, lots of information, and this is why you need to start thinking about making decisions based upon that information about how you're doing and how your competitors are doing. Okay, Alfonso. Stand up, Alfonso, just so they know who you are.
Yeah. Hello, everyone.
He's the nice man you've been emailing.
Yes, you are. Can I interrupt you?
You please do.
As you may know, come in quickly, please. The more, the merrier.
Can you speak also into this mic so that these lovely remote people can hear them?
I guess that now you can hear me loud and clear. Good. So, Dr. Barron and myself, Pat and Alfonso, will be leading this module. I will be here just to starting. I mean, I will leave you in very, very, very good hands. In fact, Pat has been leading this module for 10 years, 11 years?
150 years.
150 years before Methuselah was in this world. So I'm now taking over, but he will be helping me every single week. So I think that, did you go through the rules of the game?
Yeah, just about to do that.
Okay, the rules of the game are now, but there are some rules before that. The key rules, the ones that please don't break them in order to create any hassle for all of us. The simulation that you will go through is very, very good. In fact, you will have lots of fun, and it's probably the closest contact here in the university to a master's degree that leave you with this idea of what is to work in a company, international, multinational corporation. Teamwork, you've got that exception that you can make your own teams. Around 60% of you will have organized your own teams. The other 40% I did with the help of Excel. So I randomly allocate you to some groups, randomly allocated. I try to do it by nationality or region of the planet because that eases your connection, probably in terms of culture and so forth. But that is a total lie. So when you're in a multinational corporation, that is not true. You cannot choose the people you will be working with. You need to fit with whoever you're working with. So just some clarifications. Some of you have emailed me saying that you want to change, very few of you, want to change your team. That is not possible. It was not possible a week ago. It's not possible even now. The second emails I'm receiving is that for reasons that are outside my rational thinking and changing, some people have told me that they cannot come to the seminars and they want to get access to the online lectures. Unfortunately, because of the university policies, that is not possible. If you go to the doctor, like 3 emails I received, you go into the doctor, an appointment, a very important appointment, I will ask that those persons leave a camera or your mobile phone, use it to record what we will be experiencing on the lectures. If you're not here, you're missing a lot of probably advice and tricks. We won't tell you what exactly is, but we'll go through in a minute. But those kind of emails that you cannot come because the boss is delayed or something like that, please don't send an email to me as an apology. In fact, I will tell you later on, I will be here monitoring the people that are online, that the university granted permission to study online. And there is a lengthy process to do that. So if you apply now, mostly will be rejected by the university. So I will be here moderating the guys that are in different parts of the world and are not coming here to UEA, to Norwich, to follow this course. And they are in special teams, working in the distance rather than face-to-face. And basically, that is the only clarification. Pat.
So you're bad cop, I'm good cop, right?
I'm a bad cop, unfortunately, and he's a very good cop. So, but don't come for it. You can approach me and then I can tell you now. But not really, I will help you. All the time I will be very careful to provide you advice. I don't know how to sort out your decisions, but I can help you with advice. When you're in a company and you're with your colleagues, they call them to say, oh, can you sort it? Oh, you're paid for that, you do it. But if the big boss says, oh, we need help, oh, Ernst & Young, major consultancy, Deloitte, and so you pay $20 million to them. So in this case, you will really face what is involved in a company. And you will really enjoy it. And the part will lead you through that, and I will be just moderating the guys online. Pleased to meet you. Probably I will memorize your name. I won't say about the model.
I might remember 2 of them.
Yeah, I'm the bad cop and it memorizes.
So it's a game that you will enjoy. I'm not saying you will enjoy because I'm telling you you're going to enjoy it, but because we get feedback every year that this is the module that people enjoy most because you actually do stuff, as I said. And if you have to work in a team of people that you don't particularly like, the chances are they feel the same about you, but you just have to get on with it, right? So, and Alfonso made a very important point that we don't have the answers. We might look like gods, but we don't have the answers. And that's one thing that you really need to remember is that you might say, should I do this? And we say, look, I don't know, because what you do is only right if it's the right thing compared to what all your competitors are doing. And of course, we don't know all that. So there's a limited amount of help we can give you. But what I would say is, having played this game or run this module for the last actually 12 years, we know things that will lead you to fail very quickly. So in that respect, we kind of know best. So just listen, all right? We don't have all the answers, but there are certain things you can do to fail very quickly. But it's a module that if you fail the game part of it, it actually gives you more to write about in the reflective part of it. So if it's a complete disaster, it's not a problem because you can still get a distinction by writing a really good reflective piece. Anyway, we'll come on to that. Okay, so it's about the world of PCs, personal computers, which in this world haven't been invented, but you are going to set up a company where you are going to Design, market, build, and sell these PCs, and hopefully grind your enemies into the dust by doing better than they will. Okay, so that's the kind of the idea of it. So you have to make decisions, and the decisions are based upon the information you get fed every week if you do the right things. Okay, now I'll explain that as we go through. Right, okay. So this is a game about learning. It's a game about thinking holistically. So in other words, you don't just think about, well, I don't care about everybody else. I'm sales. I'm going to just do decisions, make decisions that are great for sales. You've got to think about the effect of those decisions on other parts of the business. So we're thinking holistically, okay? So if you say, well, look, I'm going to make a decision which is great for me, but not so good for production because I promised these customers to build 1 million items and they can only build 10,000. I don't care about that. It's not my problem. Well, so you have to think. And if each of you are going to be looking after a part of the business, you can't afford to do this separately. You've got to think and talk to each other and find out what the effect will be, okay? Ultimately, it's about making money, which of course is what happens in real life. But this is how the game really works out who has done best for the most part. But there are other things that you need to understand will also play a part in how it determines who wins, okay? But again, do not worry about some of the detail. That will become more obvious as you go through the game. And for those who just turned up, there's a copy of these lecture notes on Blackboard. You probably found it. And I am recording this just in case you want to go back over it and say, well, what did he say about this? I can't remember. Let me just change that back to, Alfonso, just to let you know, for some reason, some of the people have turned up as moderators, which means they can stuff up my presentation. So that's going to be good. Some of them are participants, which means they can't be. I don't understand why that's the case.
I cannot see the guys that are moderators in this case.
Oh, okay, right.
I bring the laptop to actually kick them out.
Okay. Oh no, don't worry about it. Just it's okay, because you can't actually get rid of them. So I need to talk to LTT. Welcome to the world of IT support, or not, as the case may be. So the idea about this is teamwork. Now, as you go through this game, there will probably be people in your team who are less than enthusiastic about doing stuff. Okay, now if you think back to your first semester module with Josie and Susan about the OB stuff, the organizational behavior, this is a good chance for you to put that into practice. If they still refuse to take part, let us know, okay? Because what you don't need are passengers, people that just sit there looking at social media and doing nothing. So, but you have to try and get these people involved, okay? So, again, it's about decision making, it's about strategic planning. So this game works on the basis of a life of a company over 2 years. That's 8 business quarters. So each week, although this week is different, is equivalent to 1 business quarter. It's sort of 3 months in the life of the business. We're going to crush 2 into the first week, but that's okay because it's very straightforward. Okay, but of course the situation in this business world, again, what happens out there is completely irrelevant. It's what happens in here that matters, and it will change. You'll get information, data back about how you're doing, how the competitor's doing, and that will change as, well, as things change, as they do better, as they do worse, as new pieces of R&D come onto the market. All that kind of stuff needs to be taken into account. So if you imagine driving from here to Edinburgh, and you don't take a map, you say, no, I'm going from here, Edinburgh, that's where I'm going to end up. You don't take a map, and then you realize that typically in summer in Britain, the roadworks completely mess up the road network. You have no alternative plan. You need to have something to continue to change what you're doing in order to eventually end up, you know, doing what you want to do, which is making lots of money. So your plans will change, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so again, I keep reiterating this. You're going to be bombarded. That's, you know, given a lot of data by market research, and really, it's those teams that react to that data best who will probably do the best. Some teams might get lucky. I mean, there is an element of luck in this game. Okay, you obviously need to take risks, because a team that doesn't take risks, that plays it safe, will probably finish middle. But it's taking the right risks. You know, for instance, one of the risks that students take, and I don't know why they do this because we tell them not to, is the first time you actually build and sell something, we say, look, you're not going to sell more than 800. Nobody ever does. And then you check and they're putting it down as, I'm going to sell 2,000. No, you're not. That's a silly risk because we've told you what the likelihood is if you're selling in the first quarter and they just ignore it. So if you want to ignore what we say, that's absolutely fine, but you'll probably wish you hadn't. So how is it conducted? So because there are so many of you, there are, I think, 51 teams in total, and the marketplace game only works on the basis of having a maximum of 8 teams. So what we've got is 7 different games running alongside each other. That's like 7 parallel universes, okay? So you're going to be competing in a game with 7 other teams, or less, fewer, depending on which game you're in. So that is your world. You can't do anything about what happens in other games, but you can worry about what happens in your games, okay? So forget the 5 concurrent games. That was last year's notes. It should be 8, because there are another 100 students from last year. So each game has a maximum of 8 teams, okay? Most teams have 6 members, but because of the way that the timetables work, not everybody's available to be in the correct session to make it all 6 people per team. So a couple of you have 5, one team has 7. It's no advantage having more or fewer. It really isn't. So don't feel as though if you're in a team of 6 that somehow the team of 7 has an advantage. What that means more likely is that you've got more lines of communication, which makes it more difficult. Okay, so it's fine. It'll all be sort of fairly equal. Okay, so when it comes to actually who wins, each game will have a winner. But overall, we will have the first 3 teams, the top 3 teams, who will win, and I know you're going to like this, Amazon vouchers. I'm not going to say how much, because it depends. We've got a set budget, and it depends how many people are in the team. So I can't guarantee, but it's going to be something along the lines of probably about £80 each for the winning team, half of that for the team that comes second, and maybe sort of 20 for the team that comes third. Okay, just don't spend it on books. All right, just enjoy yourself. I don't know, shoes or whiskey or whatever else, groceries you can buy on Amazon now. So that's okay. Sorry. Yeah, whatever you want. Just enjoy yourself. I mean, this is your chance to go out and just kind of celebrate the fact that you've won, come second or come third. Okay, top graphics there. So each business team will, when you go into the game after this lecture and you start doing your initial decisions, what it says is, right, what we want is each one of you to be responsible for 1 or maybe 2 business areas. It doesn't mean to say that you're the only person that can make decisions in that area. What it means is that, you know, there's one person who is kind of making the final decisions if the team says we can't agree. So there are different areas. There's marketing, finance, distribution, production. There's an overall leader. There's also business analytics, which doesn't really fit in this game, but if you want to go that far, then knock yourself out. But I would warn you that the data you get back is not something that you can minutely analyze, okay? It's not that accurate that you can start doing statistical analysis. Okay, you can if you want. I just think that it's maybe going a little bit too far. So each week you can change who does what. You might say, I fancy doing marketing this week, but next week I'd like to be in charge of distribution. That's fine, you can change it. You can change it as frequently as you want. But for this week, the game needs to know that at least somebody is in notional charge of one of these areas. But I'll take you through that in the second half of this lecture. Okay, so what happens is, generally, let's say we go to the middle of the game, you get an absolute barrow load of data, which you've got to look at and see what it tells me, and then you try and make decisions based upon that. And at a set time every week, you make decisions and you input them into the game, and at a certain point in the week, the game processes that information and then says, right, now that's how you all did, and then you can start the next business quarter. Okay, we refer to this as submitting or wrapping. Okay, now what happens is we will give you the times and the days by which, the latest by which you can or have to submit those decisions. If you don't, then your team will get fined a lot of money. Now we did a game for the second intake last year, and everybody wrapped on time all the way through the game. The first time it's ever happened. It'd be really good if it could happen here as well. Okay, it doesn't make any difference to us. We don't. All it takes is about 2 minutes of us just saying we're going to take $200,000 from your bank account, not individuals, but your team's bank account. Okay, and that would hurt. So please have one person in charge of making sure that at the appointed time, your companies have submitted their decisions. And I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so the idea is you've got these personal computers, these newfangled things which you've never heard of before, but you're starting to design and build. And what you're going to do is you're going to try and conquer the world by selling these PCs to the market, okay, through your own retail stores. So you don't sell them online. What you do is you start to build your sales offices, or, and this is a slight paradox, right? The internet exists in this game, but personal computers don't. Just accept it. I know it's mad, but just accept it. So you can sell through your own stores, your bricks and mortar stores, and or you can sell through the internet. So that's how you sell your PCs. Okay, so again, nothing you have to worry about just yet because that won't come into being until about Q3. But nevertheless, it's something that you'll have to think about. So the markets are split into world regions. Okay, so different colors. You've got North America, you've got Latin America, you've got Middle East and Africa, you've got Europe, and you've got Asia Pacific. Okay, which is the best, you say? We don't know. I say, we say, because we don't. There is no best. Okay, so I mean, ideally, you might start off saying we're going to sell in Shanghai or we're going to sell in Warsaw, but ultimately, by the end of the game, you'd like to think you're everywhere. Okay, there may be some reasons why you want to start off in Asia Pacific, but eventually your aim is to kind of conquer the world and see your enemies, you know, well, destroyed, basically. Let's try and be, you know, realistic about this. You want to win, which means you want to steal your competitors' markets. So you've got to think about where you're going to start selling, but you also have a factory where you make these things. Now that factory is put in one city in one of these regions only, and it can never move. So if let's say you start off in Johannesburg or Cairo, that's where it stays. You can expand production, of course, as you'd like to think you'd need to, but you can't move it. So once you get that understood, then it all makes it a lot easier. Because people say, well, we just build a second factory. No, but you can expand it. By the way, COVID is not in this business world. Okay? So things like the situation in Ukraine, COVID, doesn't exist in this world. There is actually a version of this game with real economic conditions, but I think the point of this is not about economics, it's about decision making. So let's stick with something which is a bit more contained. So the market segments, now these are basically the type of PCs that you can or will be marketing, designing and selling. Okay, now start off with the cost cutter, which is your cheap and cheerful personal computer for the people that really don't have much money to spend, but they want the basics. Okay, the workhorse is something that is a bit more kind of, has a few more features, will be working 24 hours a day, presumably in your organization, a bit more expensive maybe. Okay, the Traveler is your early version of a laptop. That's something that weighs about 2 tons and you know, take onto trains with you. Okay, so that's an early version of a laptop. And then you move up onto the kind of higher end, which is the Innovator for your scientists, your kind of your researchers, and for the Mercedes for your CEOs. Now, as you go from cost cutter up to Mercedes, it becomes, you know, more able, sexier if you like, more expensive. But the chances are when you start off this game, the research and development is not going to be around really to satisfy the customers in that top right-hand corner. So the chances are that most of you are going to be starting out building cost cutters and workhorse, maybe travelers, but inevitably, guys, stop pressing the buttons. Don't make me come back there. Okay? Stop pressing the buttons. Okay, so well, yes, that's right. So you'll start off building whatever you build, and you can change. You might start off building cost cutters, and then you might start thinking, let's move on to Mercedes, or let's move on to travelers. You can change as often as you want. So you don't have to stick with what you started. What I would say is, the first time you build something, it's going to be somewhere between absolutely awful and average. So don't expect to build the world's best PC in the first week, because you won't. It's about learning, why is it bad? What has it got that's made it bad? What should we put in there instead? Maybe that could be our second version. Okay, so these will sort of constantly be changing as you go through the game. So market research. I'm going to ask you a question. Why would market research be important to you as a company that designs, builds, markets, and sells personal computers? What do you think? Why would it be important? Or what would happen if you didn't have market research? Which one shall I go for? Which of the raised hands shall I go for, Alfonso? Do you think?
Okay, we're starting with.
Good luck.
Okay, you go, Carl.
Yeah.
You're saying the plan. Off you go.
Because you know my customer. That's why I'm doing the marketing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I ask you that, you might think, what a silly question. The reason I ask about that is because one of the first things you'll do is to choose to buy market research. Okay. Now, obviously, you haven't built anything, but what that says is this is what the world says they want. So why would you not buy market research? Some teams say it's very expensive, isn't it? Just save money and not buy market research. Good luck with that. What are you going to build? No idea. What do the customers look like? No idea. So you need market research. Okay? And what you'll find is when you actually log onto the game, there are very few decisions you have to make in this first quarter. One of them is, how much do you want to spend on market research? The more you spend, the more accurate the market research is. Now is not the time to save money. Okay, you've got plenty of money and you can't spend anywhere near all of it in this first quarter. So don't do it on the cheap, really. It's still going to be a little bit inaccurate, but that's fine. It will get better as it goes on. But just don't try and cut corners. Okay, good. So that's that one. I guarantee there'll still be a team that says, we can save money. Good luck.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Will we all be getting the same market research?
Yes. So, I mean, there is a kind of thought that well, okay. Yes, in the early stages, but in later stages, you can actually choose which regions you buy the market research in. You want to know how people feel about your brands in Africa, then you can buy it in Africa. But if somebody decides not to, they won't get it at all. Okay, so you could, if you wanted to, say, tell you what, let's get two teams together. We'll buy the market research. I'll sell it to you cheaply, so you get it for half the price. But what's to stop the first team from changing the market research and then selling a load of absolute nonsense to their competitors as a deliberate ploy to ruin their chances of winning the game? You could do that. We're not going to stop you. But obviously, don't trust your competitors. Why would they want you to do well? Okay. Anyway, so the tasks this week, or for the first half of this week, are very easy. These are the only things you have to do. You'll be finished by this afternoon, probably, which is why this afternoon's lecture is for those people who still need to ask questions about what they have to do. So if you feel that by 1 o'clock you're done, then this afternoon's lecture is optional. You don't have to come to it. If you want to hear my voice again for 2 hours, that's fine. Okay, I'm here to ask, again, I can't say do this or do that, but this is how you do that. What you do is entirely your choice. So you name your company. Now, the company name has absolutely no bearing on the performance of the company whatsoever. But if you call it anything to do with Arsenal, I'll probably fail you on the spot. So just remember that. Keep it clean, no swear words. Just try and be original. I mean, okay, we have things like, apple and stuff, so mango and banana and all that kind of stuff. All right, so it's fine. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's just, and you can even put your own logo. You can even make your own logo if you wanted to, but it doesn't actually affect the way the game's played. Yeah.
Not even in another language, use foul language, please.
Yeah.
Please don't do that.
No.
Okay? Thank you.
You can say what you want to each other, but just don't put it on this. So the second thing is what we've already talked about, which is assigning organizational responsibilities. So you've got, and I'll show you this in the second half of the lecture, you've got, I think, 5 or 6 different kind of activities. Some of you might be in charge of one and second in charge of another. As long as they're all covered by at least one person, the game is happy. And you can change those quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, so it doesn't have to be set in stone. The third one is to share your personal learning goals. Now, again, what you choose to do in this is entirely up to you. You might say you want to get some experience of working with others. You want some experience of just making decisions in a kind of protected, mythical environment. Up to you. There's no right or wrong. But when it comes to the team norms, this is a really important way for you all to say, this is how we said we were going to work as a team. Okay, so for instance, everybody turns up to meetings. Everybody, we make decisions either consensually or the majority, whichever way you want to do it. You'll soon learn that later on, what you started off saying may not become that feasible. So you might want to change it, and that's absolutely fine. But if somebody said, I didn't turn up to the meeting, I didn't know it was compulsory, well, go and check the team norms, pal. It's on there, we agreed, okay? So it's a kind of just like an aid memoir to those people that haven't got a very good memory. The penultimate one is what we call the survey of end users, market research, okay? So the game will say, unless you tell me otherwise, I will assume your team wants the most expensive market research. If you were us, you'd leave it at that, that's fine, okay? But only one person in a team needs to make that decision on behalf of the team. You don't all have to buy market research. And you'll get that as soon as the game processes, which is Tuesday at 5? Yeah, okay? So at Tuesday at 5:05, you can log on and start to look at what the market research tells you. I'll go through it. No, I won't go through all of it, but I'll tell you what it means in the lecture on Wednesday. This last bit is a bit deceptive. What it means is, how are you going to finance your business? Okay, I'll talk about that more accurately in a bit. So this is you selling shares of your company to people who give you money in return. Okay, now this is automatically done. You don't have to do this. It's automatically done by the game every quarter. So in other words, you can just forget that last bit. It's $1 million you get in the first quarter, and you can't spend more than $88,000 of it. Okay? So don't try and worry too much about that. Just accept the fact you've got 912,000 that isn't going to be doing anything. That's fine. You'll need that in future quarters. Okay, so what you need to do, sort of learning points, is just managing the team. So obviously, if you haven't met your team, I'd do it very quickly. Okay, if you're online, those people online, you, I hope, will have met your team members, and we've created a forum on Blackboard for you to meet, unless you've got some other means of doing it, but whichever way you want to do it, it's fine with us. Okay, whichever way works for you. I know that some countries may have restrictions on the sorts of technology you can use, that's fine. Okay, so organization, managing, deciding what you want. So don't be optimistic. Don't get too worried about winning the game in the first quarter, because you really can't win it in the first quarter, but you can lose it. The best way of losing this game right at the start is to not buy market research. Okay, that's all you need to worry about in this first quarter. So later this week, we'll have another lecture for this, is you get your market research, you see what it tells you, and you start looking at some of the economic and political trends in the world. Now, so by that I mean, you'll get news every week, every quarter that says potential war in this particular area, economic hardship, maybe the longer term economic forecast is looking good for that particular region. And that will affect maybe how you see the best place to start your business. Okay, there's war in Middle East, in this particular world. We'll leave that until things settle down. We may start off in China or wherever, okay? But I think ultimately, things like exchange rates, you could start getting into this kind of stuff, but ultimately, if your brands are good, you'll do well. I really wouldn't worry too much about exchange rates and stuff like that because it doesn't matter that much. Personally, and I've done this game for quite a while. Okay, so you have to think about what your strategy is. What are we going to do? We're going to sell lots and make, so small profit but large volume, or we're going to do high-end stuff, small volume but high profit. Again, this will change over time, but that will be your initial business strategy. Again, you might want to think about changing that as the information tells you whether that's a good or a bad thing. And you start off saying, right, well, we're going to start targeting up to 2 segments. Now, by segments, I mean the type of PC you're going to sell. So I'm going to start selling cost cutters and workhorse and just see how they go, okay? Or I'm going to just go to workhorse. What I would say in this game is experimentation is good, okay? If you said, well, I've got 2 different sorts of PCs I could sell, is that one going to be best or that one? Alfonso, which one do we go for? We say, I don't know, no idea, literally no idea. Why don't you just design one of those and one of those, sell them and see what happens. It's only by experimenting that you learn things that work and don't work, okay? So don't be too conservative. Try and take a few risks and say, we might decide that one's absolutely awful, but that one was good. But if we didn't design that one, we'd never know it. And the market research will tell us, our competitors, which of them have done well. Oh, let's look at their PC. What have they got that we haven't? Why are they doing so well, we're not? So that's the kind of thing that market research will give you. You then build your factory and you say, how much do we actually want this factory to be able to build? There's no point having a massive factory but only using 2% because the game will see that as you wasting money. Okay, so it's easy in the first quarter. You set it at a fixed capacity of 25 a day, which believe me will be more than enough. And then you start to build your first sales channel. That might be a bricks and mortar office, it may be a web center, but these buildings, these offices take 1 quarter to build. So if you build it now, it's ready by next quarter to start selling. Okay, but you think, if you say, well, let's not build a sales channel just yet, to which I would say, and how are you going to sell stuff? You can't, you have to, you really have to, A, build a factory, and B, build at least 1 sales channel. Otherwise, you're going to be making no money when everybody else is going to make, small amounts of money. Okay, so that's what you do, and you design these brands to appeal to each target segment. So the market research you get at the start of this quarter says, these are the sorts of things that people in cost cutter, workhorse want to see in brands. Okay? So if I were you, look at the things that matter most to them and give them those things. It's one of those kind of, when people say, how do I win the game? Well, there's like a mantra at the end that says, this is what you should be doing. Find out what people want, design what people want, build what they want, tell them you've got what they want, and sell them, and then collect the money. That's it. That's really what you have to do. Right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the future, but just let it flow over you, okay? This is not anything you can do anything about or need to understand just yet. So in quarters 3 and 4, this is where you start to kind of learn what you're doing. You start to expand your factory. You start to expand your sales empire. You just get better and better. Okay, you invest in research and development. So there'll be the sort of eggheads out there, the scientists developing features that you think, wow, I want that. I want that in my next brand because I think that will appeal to the Mercedes customers. And you can invest money in, to get the scientists to work on things that will give you the competitive advantage over your competitors. The second half of the game, quarters 5, 6, 7, and 8, are where you start to really motor. Okay, and there'll come a point where the teams are doing so well, you literally have more money than you can spend, which is a nice feature, okay? So that's what's in the future. So the game will have, the simulation will have a lot of help. Okay, so come to us if you've said, well, I've looked at the help and I really can't find the answer to my question. We're happy to help. But we're going to say to you, check out the help first. And they've got lots of simulations saying things like, right, how do you schedule production, which is the hardest thing. Here's an example. So lots of micro simulations that we recommend you look at in order to get an understanding. But again, if you've done that and still don't get it, we're happy to help. Okay, so in some versions of this game, when we used to run this game in semester 2, there were 12 business quarters. Okay, well, there were 12 weeks. And we had a bit of a break in week 8 where you lot wrote a report to say, and this is what we're going to be doing. And from that, we could say, right, this is how much money we're going to give you as a final sort of input of cash to go and do your things. We haven't got time for that. So in quarter 1, you get $1 million. In quarter 2, you get $1 million. Quarter 3, you get $1 million. In quarter 4, you get $1 million. In quarter 5, you get $5 million, and that's it. Everything else you have to generate yourself. So when you see people talk, when the game talks about a business plan, ignore it. Okay? You don't have to do this. This is a longer version of the game. So we've been very generous. Even if your plan is absolutely awful, we'll still give you $5 million. So, as I said, this is equity financing. This is about you getting money in. Okay, so we give you that $1 million for the first 4 quarters and the $5 million for the 5th quarter. And your shares will be worth a certain amount of money. Now, how well you do in the game will see your shares increase in value. Okay, and that's a small portion of how the game works out who the winner is. So things like how much money you've made, you know, the market share that you've got, the share price, how much money you've made for your investors, all that kind of stuff. So that's all kind of fairly easy. The one thing which might cause a few problems is if you go into debt, okay, which of course you don't want to do. But if you do, it's fairly easy to get out of debt. You just have to accept that maybe your decision making hasn't been great, and you've got to start thinking about other ways of progressing. Okay, so equity financing is very straightforward. As I said, then you get $5 million in quarter 5. You can borrow more money from the bank, and at certain stages in the game, the bank says, "Hey, want some money? Fine, we'll lend you some money," and it depends on how well you're doing as to how much they'll lend you. Now, if you're smart, you would borrow money that you can pay back before the end of the game. And I'll explain that as we go through, okay? So I know some of you might come from cultures where borrowing money is not seen as a particularly good thing, but in this particular game, I suggest that if you've got a good plan for what to do with it, I would recommend that you do that. So, now I'm not stereotyping Italian Americans, but that is somebody that you do not want to get on the wrong side of. This is Guido. He doesn't have a sense of humor. If you fall into debt, Guido is more than happy to rescue you by lending you money. Unfortunately, the interest rates are very high, and if you don't pay it back, then, well, you can imagine. But he will also take shares in your company, which devalues them. Not by very much, but enough to make a difference to your overall score. Okay, so what we're saying is, if the person in charge of, let's say, accounting or finance, if they're starting to be too risky, you might want to say, right, okay, hang on a second. We don't know how much money we're going to get in through revenue. Okay, it might be this much, it might be this much. If we're just assuming that we're going to sell everything we build, we're going to be meeting him very soon. Ask yourself, okay, what happens if we only sell half the number of PCs that we think we might sell? That's probably a strategy which is more sensible until you can kind of understand how well you're doing. Okay, so don't meet Guido, just be a little bit careful in these first few quarters. Okay, so the interest rate depends upon, I suppose, how much he's going to lend you. but the interest rates are ridiculously high, between 10% and 25%. For each $100 he lends you, he takes one share of your firm, one share of the, I think, 10,000 that you've got. Okay, so it's not a good thing. Anyway, that's enough about him. That's ultimately what happens if you don't pay back. So in the 1920s, 1930s America, you may end up headfirst into a vat of concrete. In fact, interestingly, in Las Vegas, where the Midwest, where global warming is really having an effect, and the lakes are starting to go down, and the lakes are starting to be about sort of 2 feet deep, they're starting to discover lots of people like him that have been deposited there about 60 years ago. So don't be one of them. Okay, just be very careful. So bankruptcy, firms, companies, teams do go bankrupt, but even if they do go bankrupt, you can get out of bankruptcy. So it's not disastrous, it's not the end of the game. It will obviously affect your performance, but if you do go bankrupt, which is where I think your debts are more than the value of the assets of the company, you can still turn that round. And we do have a prize at the, well, a sort of certificate for the team that's kind of come out of deep financial problems and still done rather well. Okay, so bankruptcy is obviously something that does happen, not very often, maybe 3 teams every year. Okay, so the mechanics. Again, top rate graphics there. So you can play the game from really wherever you want. So after this, you might want to go to the library, you might want to work on a particular day of the week. Because it's remote, it's kind of, it's an online game, you can do it wherever you want. But every week we have labs, and for those of you who are doing this, this module physically, there'll be a 1 hour 50 lab session a week. Okay, this week there'll be sort of 2 sessions that we've, lectures that we put instead, but please turn up, okay? If you come and say, right, we just want to make sure that you understand we're here, but we're going to go off and work in the library, that's absolutely fine, not a problem. But we're not going to answer questions in the library, okay? So just make sure that you, you stay around to ask the questions you need, but if you want to go and do it in your own place, that's absolutely fine. Now, of course, I don't know why this guy's had the top of his head cut off. It doesn't, I'm not entirely sure whether he had a hat before, but that's us. And we can check to see not what you're doing, but whether everybody's participating. It actually logs the number of minutes that you've spent online. Okay, so if there's one person that hasn't logged on at all or has just sat there and done nothing, we'll know. So just make sure that you understand that you're kind of being monitored, but not minutely. We're really just trying to make sure that those people who don't take part are encouraged to do so. Okay, so we can log in and check how you're doing and see at a particular point in the week where you have to submit your decisions. Anybody that hasn't done that, we will log on and do it for you. We don't care about the decisions we take. We just say, right, I've got 2 minutes before the pub opens. I want to make sure that this team who hasn't submitted, we submit, and we're going to make any decision we care to do to get this done quickly. So don't let that happen, okay? So just make sure that you know, you do what you're asked to do. Anyway, so we can all do it remotely. So as I said, so wrapping up or submission is something. No, I'm sorry about saying this about 1,000 times, okay? But it's important. Because in each team, there should be one person who is responsible for this every week. Now, when you get someone that says, I thought you were doing it. No, you said you were going to do it this week. And then you find out that no one's done it and you've got a $200,000 hole in your bank account. Okay? So the first decisions you have to take, the latest by tomorrow at 5 p.m. British time. Okay? The chances are you'll be done by the end of today. So once all of those decisions are in, the game can actually process and then say, right, here's the data, the information about your performance in that previous quarter and the information about your competitors. So once you've gone about, well, probably about 2 or 3 minutes or 10 minutes past the wrapping time, you can log back on and see how you did. It's instantaneous. Sometimes it takes a little time because some teams are late, okay? But again, very, very strict times. So this is your list of times. They're not the same times every week because for some reason the lab sessions in later weeks can be moved around because of timetabling issues. I don't know why, I apologize. We'd like to have them the same time every week, but that's just not possible. So for the most part, they're either going to be Friday or Monday, because some of you will have your lab session on a Friday and that doesn't leave you much time. So we're going to make the wrap time on the Monday for those weeks, okay? Which means you have to work weekends, so apologies for that. But it doesn't mean to say that you can't start thinking about these decisions earlier in the week. There'll be tutorials that we give you that will enable you to start thinking about some of this stuff much earlier than your lab session. So there are no extensions allowed for these times, because if you have an extension, it just stuffs it up for everybody else. Okay, so no extensions. When it comes to the second piece of coursework, that's fine, but you go through the usual procedure. Any questions so far? Good, okay. It's confusing, there's a lot to remember, but once you get into it, it makes a lot more sense. So just bear with us for the time being. Okay. So, again, just more kind of discipline stuff. If your team fails to submit, we do it for you and we fine you $200,000. If you do it again, we fine you double that, and so on and so forth. Teams rarely do it more than once, okay? So just have somebody allocated to do this every week and make sure they understand the deadline, okay? If something dramatic happens, you know, there's a, I don't know, there's a hurricane or something, I can always extend the time for everybody, but I think that's very, very unlikely. So just make sure that the person allocated knows when they have to do it. So in later quarters, you might say, right, we've got the decisions, we've submitted, all is done, we can have the rest of the week off. And then you think, actually, I could do with changing some of those decisions. That's fine. You can unwrap, you can unsubmit, change your decisions, and then resubmit. You can do that as many times as you want, so long as you submit finally before the deadline, okay? So it's good, you know, if you suddenly discover that your competitors have done something that you didn't think they had, which affects the quality of your decisions, you can change it. So the teams have been chosen by you. Alfonso has already mentioned this. So all of the team members should be working in the same lab session. If you're online, of course, then you'll be doing this in your own time anyway, but we will have sessions for you where we meet you and ask if you have any questions, because it's unfair that those people who are here physically have the ability to ask questions, but those people online don't. So we will meet you, okay, and we'll be in touch about when that would be, because it depends really on when's available to you. So you can't change teams, okay, so that's fine, you understand that. And, you know, if you don't like your team members, probably you should have chosen your team a bit earlier. If you discover that there's somebody you thought you liked and now you hate, you just have to deal with it, okay? Just be professional. Okay, so this is what I said earlier on. So, well, we have this, people come up to us and say, Pat, how do I win the game? I want to win this game. Well, there we are, read that, okay? So really, it's about giving people what they want. Now, if you said, right, I've got this PC, I'll give them all of these features they want, plus loads of things they don't really want, but wouldn't it be great if I did? No, it wouldn't. You actually get worse feedback from your customers if you give them things they actively say aren't important to them. Okay, so really only give them what they want. When it comes to advertising, you've got to make sure that you tell them things that are important to them. And that's stuff that you'll find from market research. Okay, so it's easy, really. Just follow that mantra and everything will probably go okay. It's when you start moving away from this that you start getting problems. Anyway, so easy enough in principle. So the way you win the game, now this is something you're not going to see for the first 3 quarters. It's what's called the cumulative or the balanced scorecard or the cumulative balanced scorecard. It's actually quite complex, but once you understand how this works, it could lead you to a strategy for how to maximize your performance. Now, again, that makes no sense, but it will in a second. So in quarter one and quarter two, you've all done awful. All right, just accept it. You're not doing very well at all because really you haven't done anything that's going to generate a really good performance. But in quarter three onwards, you start doing things that generate higher scores. And I'll show you what I mean by the scores later on. So it basically takes all aspects of the company and says your performance is basically that multiplied by that, multiplied by that, by that, by that, by that. So there's no area of the company that should be left. Yeah, we don't really care about that. That's important. If you get great scores, great scores, great scores, great scores, 0, you score 0. So you've got to make sure that all of these areas are looked after and, you know, optimized. But early on in the game, about halfway through, you look at your score and it's, oh, I'm doing really bad. No, you're not. You'll be surprised at how a team that looks like they're doing really badly halfway through suddenly just explodes in terms of their performance. So we'll keep talking about this as we go through. Do not be discouraged, okay? Because everybody does badly in the first few quarters. Okay, moving towards the end of this, okay? So I'm going to move forward a bit. So on the left-hand side there is what we call, well, it's the cumulative balanced scorecard. So each week you have a balanced scorecard for how you did the previous quarter. The cumulative is looking at a moving average of the last 4 quarters. So as you move forward, you lose all the bad ones and pick up all the good performances, and your average will get better and better. So the percentage that each member of the team gets for the 30% that is the game element is determined by what your cumulative balanced scorecard is at the end of the game. As if you were starting quarter 9 and then the game stops. So that's when we work out what score you've got. Now, some of you that said, oh, I got 49.9, and if I'd got an extra 0.1, I'd have got 50, and I'd have got 70. Sorry, you just have to accept the fact that these are kind of very hard and fast, okay? But let's just say that a team that does badly, that gets 45%, you'll still pass so long as you do a half decent written piece, okay? So the teams that actually have a disaster in their game with a fantastic piece of written coursework could still get a distinction. And it happens, I won't say all the time, but it happens fairly frequently. Okay? So just bear that in mind. Yes, teams have got 4,000 plus, but it's rare. Okay? How you do really depends on how your competitors do. The worse they're doing, the better you're doing, which is why I have no mercy. If you can find a way of well, obviously stick within the rules. If you can find a way of making their lives miserable, then do it. But just stick within the rules of the game, okay? We have had members of teams in the past logging on as other team members in other groups, messing up their decisions, and then logging off again. If I find anybody that does that, I'll fail them on the spot, okay? We've only had one person do it. So what I'm going to suggest you do this afternoon is the first thing you do once you've logged on is to change your password. Otherwise, you leave yourself open to, well, less than honest business practice. Okay, so the lectures, you'll have a lecture a week, followed by a lab, a 2-hour lab or 1 hour 50 lab. And as you know, obviously, if you're here, you're face-to-face, so that's great. Please turn up every week. If you're doing this remotely, then you'll do this remotely and we'll record it so that you can go back and listen to things that we said. We'll be releasing some tutorials so you can start to think about some elements of the next quarter in time for you to start thinking about it so that you've got a few days before your labs and then you know what questions to ask, okay? Just check your timetables because the labs do change every week for reasons beyond our control. Okay, so again, I've gone over this. So when people say, should I just go for Cost Cutter or Mercedes or what? I don't know, what do you think? It's up to you. This is not about us. We don't have the answers, we really don't. This is a complex adaptive system, all right? We don't know what things are going to be like in a quarter's time. We don't know what the right thing to do is because we don't know what you're doing relative to your competitors. So if you say to us, Pat, I want to do this, how do I do it? We'll tell you, but we won't tell you what to do because we don't know. And actually that's your decision, okay? So if you say, well, I want to increase the size of my factory, okay, fine. Should I increase the size of my factory? Well, I mean, what I would say in that particular question is, if you're expecting to sell more as the game goes on, your factory should keep pace. If your factory is the same size as it was at the start of the game, when everybody else has kind of made theirs about 50 times bigger, you're not going to win because you can't sell them because you can't build enough. Okay, so again, just think about the logic of this. Okay, so the remote study students, we will have a slot which we will do online with you, so you get a chance to ask questions. We'll be in touch with you about when those would be, okay? It's about the same, because if you think about it, a number of groups in a physical lab session with 2 members of staff, probably each team gets about 20 minutes in total. So that's probably consistent with what the remote students are getting. Okay, so at the end of the module in August, we will have a final lecture where we say who the winners are. We'll talk about some of the, the last minute coursework issues. We'll have the awards, we'll have certificates, we'll have Amazon vouchers. And it's just a nice way of finishing off the year. And it's normally followed by a barbecue. All right, so free food, the 2 most beautiful words in the English language. And there may even be alcohol as well for those that can. Because this game is actually run by a company called Integrated Learning Solutions, and they have lots of different games. So actually, this is a very well-known simulation. So, if you do well in this, on your CV, this looks pretty good. Okay? So, if you do well, don't be afraid to tell the whole world about it. So there is a textbook. Unfortunately, it's massively expensive. Luckily, being generous people, what we've done is we've chosen 5 chapters that we think would be relevant to you, some of the theory behind some of the things you're going to be doing, and we've made them available as e-chapters that you get through the game. Okay? If anybody fancies a chapter that isn't one of those 5, then I'm sure we can find it somewhere. Okay? So, okay, so anyway, so you've got those chapters. You'll see it when you log on. There'll be 5 e-chapters. Things like working as a team, things like quality, some of the things that you will need to start thinking about, because underpinning this game is academic theory, really, about things like branding, about things like advertising, about things like quality control, that kind of stuff. Right, assessment. So 30% of your mark is on the game, 70% is on the actual individual reflective piece. The coursework will be made available probably next week when Tony Polak does his lecture on decision making and introduces the coursework. Okay? It used to be a more balanced 50-50, but people became, I think, rightfully unhappy that if they did badly in the game, they really couldn't bring themselves up to a distinction by doing a really good piece. So we've worked out the 30-70 is about the fairest split. You've got until the 11th of August. But what I would say here is you don't have to wait until the game's finished before you start writing your piece. Okay? If you say, well, I'm going to concentrate in my written piece of coursework on some of the things that happened halfway through the game, that's fine. It hasn't got to be based upon your final performance. It's got to be on certain things that you're asked to look at, which you could do much, much earlier. So don't leave it to the last minute. Okay, you might want to keep a diary if you wanted to, just so you can remember what you've done, things that went well, things that went badly. You don't have to submit the diary. Okay, right, so that's the first bit done. I'm going to stop recording that. And thank you to the online